Good morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It is Friday, January 28th in the year of our Lord, 2022. I am live from the West Coast. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you. I hope you are watching on the Salem News Channel. If you are not, you are missing a lot. Just download it. Take it with you wherever you go. You can keep your eyes on the studio. We may have had a Dwayne sighting this morning. That means we'll have 7 more weeks of winter. It's just one of those things. When we see Dwayne on a Friday, it's really a rare thing. It's like a blood moon. So he's in the house today, grumbling around like a bear who just got out of his cave, which in fact may be the case, but he's grumbling around back there. Let me do the rundown of the news. We're going to talk about Dr. Fauci this morning. Is it time for him to go? 1-800-520-1234. Very disturbing article in the Washington Post this morning. Yesterday I wrote a column about the fact that the American public has undeniably lost confidence in Dr. Fauci. It's 42%. So he's no longer capable of persuading anyone of anything. There are no metrics by which to judge COVID success. There is no idea whether or not there's an off-ramp. Parents know that masks have got to come off kids. There's a consensus that's growing, except in deep blue bubbles. Dr. Fauci is the subject of a profile in the style section of the Washington Post today that leaves one with the impression he's an exhausted and rapidly aging, frustrated older man who did good work but needs to move on because the country needs to move on. And by the way, I think Becerra over at HHS and Walensky at CDC and Jeff Zients at the White House, they all need to move on. We're never going to get out of this. We're never going to be done with COVID unless Joe Biden gets a new team. And Ron Klain knows it. Everybody knows it. But that's not the big, I want to talk to you about that after the break. 1-800-520-1234. Should Tony Fauci leave? I am not looking for anti-vaxxers. I know what you think. We've covered that. I'm not looking for people who think that Dr. Fauci is working for Big Pharma. I'm looking for people like me, people who gave him the benefit of the doubt for a year, who thought, okay, good to have this guy around. He's sort of Marcus Welby, a little bit older than Marcus Welby, but America could use a doctor. I like Dr. Birx too. I like Scott Atlas. I like everyone who tries. I got nothing against them. It's just we need leadership. They got to go. So if you were pro-Fauci and now it's time for him to go Fauci, like me, I'd like to hear from you. 1-800-520-1234. I'm going to talk about Fauci with Representative Jim Banks of the Republican Study Group. We have Arizona's Governor Doug Ducey coming along next hour as well. Congressman Michael Waltz, who has quickly, along with Congressman Gallagher, has become really the face of Republican seriousness and purposefulness in the House of Representatives on defense budget matters. Dean Matt Spalding and Sonny Bunch coming along. But first, the rundown. We don't want wars. Russia sends less hawkish message on Ukraine. That's because they're playing appeaser rope-a-dope. They gave us a bunch of questions, which we dutifully gave them answers to. And they're saying, well, we're reading the answers. Meanwhile, Great Britain tells everyone brace for Russian cyber attacks because it's part of the Russian playbook. I've been reading H.R. McMaster's new book, Battleground. Before he took over the National Security Council after Michael Flynn left early in the Trump presidency, he had just run a deep dive into the last Russian invasion of Crimea. And this is just textbook. They're doing it again. It's going to happen. Wall Street Journal, as Russia threatens Ukraine, Europe scrambles to secure its gas supply. That means us. We got to come to the rescue because the feckless Germans turned off their nuclear plants. Really, honestly, if the Germans are chattering and have chattering teeth and shivering bones, I'll feel bad for them, but it's their own damn fault. They turned off perfectly good, useful nuclear power plants because there are a bunch of crazy greens running around their country. New York Times details the Russia buildup around Ukraine, and it's huge. The 130,000 troops, they actually have a map of it, and there are 20,000 troops near the 2 breakaway provinces. You know, they're all over Crimea, and they're in Moldova, and they're in Belarus, and if they move in, they're taking everything. Meanwhile, however, there's a very inspiring piece on the Ukrainian volunteers training to fight Russians in the streets of Kyiv. Liskia Bida, 47, Marianne Zago, 52, Yaroslav Brzezinski, 44. My gosh, Dwayne could fight for these guys. Good for them. The Russians are going to pay a price. They're going to pay a price. Top Democrats are going to skip the Biden visit to Pittsburgh today. President Biden is going to Pittsburgh. But the crazy left-wing giant who's running for Senate, the Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, he's like 6'7" of Bernie Sanders. He's not going to be able to make it. And Joshua Shapiro, the Attorney General, who I know and like and is a good guy, Josh Shapiro's doing a disappearing act as well, because nobody actually wants to be anywhere near Joe Biden. New justice will have little power to thwart Supreme Court's rightward lurch. Adam Liptak is just figuring this out. Apparently, that's a headline over at the New York Times. Justice Stephen Breyer's successor may have turned out to have a blazing intellect, infectious charm, a fresh liberal perspective. Could be, in fact, a raving lunatic progressive left-winger, which is what the left wants. And there is no reason to think the new justice will be able to slow the court's accelerating drive to the right. There isn't. I'm going to talk about it with Matt Spaulding in hour 3. This is the term. This is the time. The next 5 months. I've waited 35 years for the next 5 months. The end of Roe v. Wade, 35 years being when I got out of law school and started practicing law and did the D.C. circuit until I retired. Property rights are coming up. Gun rights are coming up. Religious liberty is coming up. Everything is coming up this semester, and it's going to be 6-3, 6-3, 6-3, 6-3, 6-3. And then Breyer's going to leave, and the new justice is going to come on, and it's going to be 6-3, 6-3, 6-3, 6-3. Until a conservative retires, it's a 6-3 court. And there are a number of wonderfully qualified black female judges. Now, I think it's wrong for the president to keep saying, we're not picking the best person for the job. We're picking, in this case, a black female. But that's what Ronald Reagan promised, a woman, when he ran for president, and he came up with Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who was an Arizona appeals court judge. So I really don't know who he's going to pick, although I assume it's going to be Judge Brown Jackson off the D.C. circuit, because that is the AAA team. There are a few other people out there, but I think it's going to be Brown Jackson. The U.S. economy grew in the fourth quarter, as the GDP shows the strongest year in decades. And a couple of lefties on social media said, what the heck? Why isn't everyone happy? We have this great growth. Because inflation is faster than growth. So we're going backwards. It's that simple. When you have 7% inflation and 5.5% growth, you lose. It's just that simple. The economy doesn't matter when you haven't got a raise equal to the cost of gas. My gosh, California. So it's horrendous. The Fed's fledgling inflation hawks, according to the Wall Street Journal. It's great that they're starting to talk, but they've got to act. Earnings season. Apple revenue hit another record. That's good news. The big behemoths. Southwest turns a quarterly profit. Says the worst of Omicron is over. That's good news. Robinhood stock dropped 12%. The loss is worse than analysts expected. That's actually like Bitcoin. Robinhood traders, wait till you get your tax bills too. If you made money and then you lost money, you got to net it out. And if you ended up losing more money than you made, you still have to pay on the gain. Short-term gains are a killer. You're going to find that out. U.S. and Iran in the ballpark of a possible deal, says White House officials. That's in the Times of Israel. What terrible news. What terrible, terrible news. These people, I don't know how we get three more years of Jimmy Carter or Joe Biden. But the very first thing is, Joe, we got to start by getting rid of Dr. Fauci. Mike in Youngstown, Ohio, from the homeland. Did you go to Cheney? Did you go to Cardinal Mooney? Did you go to Austin Pound Fitch? Where'd you go, Mike?
Went to Ursuline.
Oh, all right, good Catholic boy from Ursuline. John F. Kennedy Warren used to crush Ursuline whenever they played us. But actually, we never played Ursuline because they would beat up our kids, so that didn't happen.
I'm sorry.
Good morning.
We got a foot of snow here last week.
I know, and there's another foot coming. That's why I'm in California, and my brother is shoveling snow. Mike, you're going to have to hold over the. You're going to have to hold over the break. I miscued the break. I saw Youngstown, Ohio, got all excited because I knew it would be someone from Ursuline or Cardinal Mooney calling up to pretend that they were actually a pretty good high school. They're not. They're really, it's just trouble with Ursuline and Cardinal Mooney. Don't go anywhere, Mike. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. We're having a jazzy morning here, America, because tonight, down in Irvine, California, the Meta Quintet is playing at the Barclay, and Generalissimo will be there as a band parent, as one of his charges sits in with the Meta Quintet just jamming. Now, I'm not going to go. I know people want me to, and I often sit in, but no, not tonight. But that's at the Barclay tonight. I'm joined by Sonny Bunch on Twitter, at Sonny Bunch, the host of Across the Movie Aisle and the Bulwark Goes to the Movies. And I desperately need help, Sonny. The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt is holding a shower for 20 women's on Sunday, a baby shower. So I have to flee the house. What can I go see?
Well, Hugh, if you have to flee the house, you're in bad shape.
Oh no!
This is like the third weekend in a row where there's nothing really new out, or I guess the second weekend in a row. You could go see the new Scream.
No, I'm not gonna do that.
Movies, Hugh. You could go see the new Scream. It's scary. It's a scary comment on the state of horror and franchise sequels, reboots, etc. in general. I actually do like the new Scream. I saw it. It's good, and it does have some clever things to say about the state of the franchise scene. It is not just about horror movies anymore. It's looking at franchises of all sorts right now.
Well, it's a generation jumper, isn't it? It's got to bring in a new generation of young and attractive victims.
Right. Well, that's kind of the bit here with this one. The new Scream is a soft reboot, is what I would call it. In the film, they call it a requel, a remake that is also a sequel. And it brings back the old cast. It puts them together with a new cast, and the new folks have to learn how to survive from the old folks. It's good, but it's a horror movie, so you're not gonna.
I'm not gonna go. No, it's a guy with the white mask, right?
Yes, that's
not gonna do it. Right? Yeah, not gonna do it. So there's nothing else. I watched 9 hours of Get Back, the Beatles, Peter Jackson. By the way, did you watch that?
I did not. That's a lot of Beatles for me.
Oh, it's like being dragged behind a pickup truck. It's just
I like
endless.
The Beatles. I like the Beatles fine, but it's a lot. It's kind of a lot for a boomer.
If I brought anyone into a studio for 9 hours to watch me prepare over 4 weeks, how I prepare for a radio show, it's not like listening to the radio show. It would actually be very boring. It's people working, is what it is.
Right. Well,
so Sonny,
with the Beatles, it's a little bit different because they're sitting there putting together. I've watched some of the clips. And it seems interesting. It's just like it's a lot. It's a lot of Beatles, and
it could have been a 2-hour show. You know what it's done? It's done to drive home two messages. One, Yoko is nuts, and two, Paul is the Beatles. That's the message of the whole thing. Yoko is crazy. It's really all about McCartney.
Right, especially at this point in the Beatles, towards the tail end when John has checked out, he's on drugs. And George is feeling ignored and belittled, and Ringo's just happy to be there.
Do you know Ringo Starr's real name?
I do not.
Neither did I, and everyone laughed at me. It's Richard Starkey. Did you know he was named Richard Starkey?
I did not. I did not know that.
He's named Sir Richard Starkey because he's been knighted. And so at the end of the credits, we're looking at the credits, and there's the Octopus's Garden. I said to the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt, "Who's Richard Starkey?" And she started to laugh at me. She laughed because I didn't know. Of course, girls know. She actually knows the birthdays of the Beatles because she's my age, and the Beatles were a big deal when we were kids. But I didn't know Richard Starkey was Ringo Starr. I'm bringing this news. This is my Friday news flash. Sonny, give me something. What do I watch on? Give me something to watch on Netflix or something.
Yeah, so you're stuck with Netflix. You're stuck with streaming this week, Hugh. I'm sorry. There's just nothing. There's nothing new in theaters. It is a wasteland out there.
Man, you're a theater guy. You're like the Tribune of the theaters. You ought to be hired by the Motion Picture Association to be the ambassador of goodwill for going to the movies.
I try my best. I mean, it's funny. The Sony had scheduled for this weekend Morbius, the movie Morbius with Jared Leto. It's set in the Spider-Man universe.
Yeah, I would have gone to that.
The Doctor, but that got pushed back. That got pushed back 2 months.
There is one theater near me that's still showing Venom, which I didn't see when it came out.
You could go see that. I mean, it's not. There are worse ways to spend 2 hours. The nice thing about it is that it's short. It's only about 100 minutes long.
No, but there's a baby shower. That's a 4 or 5 hour deal. I need 4 or 5 hours. I guess I can go to lunch beforehand.
Yeah, sorry, I can't help you there. So again, your best options are streaming on Amazon Prime, on Prime Video. There's a movie out called The Hero, which it's an Iranian film. It's subtitles. It's very serious. This is art house stuff, but it's by Asghar Farhadi, who is an Iranian auteur. And the very simple setup for this movie is there's a guy in prison. His name's Rahim. He is out on basically a weekend furlough to try and convince his creditor to alleviate his sentence. He lives in Iran, so he can go to prison for debts. They have debtors' prisons there. So he's trying to get out. He's trying to essentially liquidate some coins that his girlfriend found, but do not belong to him or her. She just found them on the street. And when that plan goes slightly sideways, he decides to, put up ads to return them to the rightful owner, and somebody comes along and claims them, and he becomes a cause celeb. He's like, oh, look at this poor man who did the right thing, in the face of Allah, and did not want to, bring dishonor upon his family, etc. So people raise money to try and get him out. It is a very, very interesting movie. I don't want to say anything more than that because I think you should watch. You should watch it if you want to watch it. This won the grand prize at the Festival du Cannes.
Oh, you've got me hooked. So is the filmmaker an Iranian currently, or is an expat? He
still lives in Iran. He is an Iranian, and he exists in a fairly tricky situation because
of course he does.
Iran is a tricky place for an artist to
It's
live.
a theocracy that will kill you if they do not like what you produce. Yeah, that's tricky.
This is one of the undercurrents of this film is the relationship between this man who is leaving the prison and the woman he is with has to remain a secret because he lives in a theocracy and they do not care for premarital relations between men and women. And as a result, he starts lying about the money. He starts lying about these coins, and that is what gets him into trouble. And it's also mixed in with the world of social media. Social media comes into play because people are accusing him of being a liar. Videos are going viral. It's really a very, very interesting movie, and it is slippery in how it treats this lead character. He is neither.
You've got me.
He is not pure-hearted. He is not a pure hero. There is no real villain in this. It's a bunch of circumstances put together that very much resemble life.
Yeah, Sonny,
art is very much
art that comes out of totalitarian regimes is always interesting. One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich is easily the most impactful book of my youth other than Scripture. And I watched Chinese movies to see what President Xi is allowing. I had Ken Follett on yesterday, and the author of 160 million books that have sold over has finally written a book called Never that the Chinese won't publish in Mandarin. It's not available in China. So when you're up against the totalitarian state, that which gets through and is still good is very, very good. It's like a degree of difficulty in diving, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that is and Farhadi is generally recognized to be an exceptionally talented filmmaker. His A Separation was another big festival favorite. I think it may have won the best foreign feature Oscar. I can't remember, but he is the best filmmaker in Iran. And folks, look again. It's subtitles. It is set in Iran. This is not a big action comic book movie, so it has a fairly limited audience. But if you are looking for something a little bit different,
The Hero on Netflix.
Check it out. Hero on Netflix. Go
All right,
watch
Sonny,
it.
but you have done good work this morning, Sonny. You've saved my Sunday afternoon. I can retreat and watch The Hero on Netflix. Thank you, Mr. Bunch.
A Hero. It's a hero.
A Hero.
A Hero. Yes.
A Hero on Netflix. Thank you, Sonny Bunch. Follow him at Sonny Bunch on Twitter. Follow Bulwark Goes to the Movies. Follow Across the Movie Aisle as well. Sonny, always productive. The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. I have a wise friend who says the majority opinion of a well-informed populace is more often than not correct. and here the system breaks down. That observation has little to do with the subject of my poem. I've never been a lawyer, so I shouldn't be opining on the future implications of some justices resigning. And I've never been a soldier or been sent to far dominions, so on military matters, well, I shouldn't have opinions. I've never been a doctor, practiced medicine by stealth, so perhaps I should keep silent on matters touching health. I passed my economics class. The prof was quite forgiving. So who am I to talk about the painful cost of living? I've never sought asylum or proposed an insurrection, never crossed a border with an order of protection. I've never made an edict or composed a regulation. I haven't worked for decades on a piece of legislation. I've never told a secret or been privy to a leak. Certainly you're right to ask, what right have I to speak? Because that's what folks are writing any time I take up tweeting. The things they have to tell me I shouldn't be repeating. They say that we, the people, have some rights that need amending. Proponents of debating aren't popular or trending. Let's leave it to the experts and some candidate who's running. You really must admit their successes have been stunning. That's Well, I Never by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, you're more concerned with politics than you normally are.
Well, you kind of steered me back in that direction last week when we decided it would be a bad idea to talk about sport.
Well, you really don't have to follow my every whim, but I'm glad you did.
I see.
And so, what should I suggest for next week? Never by Ken Follett. I just finished interviewing Ken Follett. I don't have any suggestions.
Okay,
you are a
I'm
free-range poet. Free-range poetry. Now, in the meantime, TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com remains open for business, I assume?
Indeed it is. And it's being worked on by a master website maker, a fixer of things. So.
Does it need fixing again?
Always. It always needs improvement. We all need improvement.
It's like your hockey game. Tarzana Joe on Twitter, TarzanaJoe.com for the latest poetry. And if you want to email him about your poetry needs, TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. Thank you, Joe. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt from the West Coast. While Washington gets blanketed with snow again, a nor'easter rolling up from Virginia all the way to Maine. I'm glad I'm in California. I'm joined by a hearty Indianian, Jim Banks, a Hoosier who is indifferent to snow, wind, and ice. I assume Congressman Jim Banks. Am I right about that?
No doubt about it. Bring it on.
Yeah, that's what, I'm from Ohio, so we actually know about snow. In Indiana, they don't really know about snow. But let's talk, Congressman. Good to talk to you again. Happy New Year to you. I haven't talked to you in 2022. But I noticed online you were waging a lonely battle to keep people focused on three things: the southern border, Dr. Fauci, and Putin, as well as the China bill. So I thought, let's check in with the chairman of the Republican Study Committee on all four of these subjects, Congressman. Bring us up to date on the border collapse.
Well, Hugh, I mean, more and more of the American people are recognizing that the crisis at the border isn't just related to illegals. Now we have 2 million illegals that have come over the border since Joe Biden's become president. But at this moment today, as we speak, Hugh, the most startling statistic that we've seen is that fentanyl is now the leading cause of death of working Americans aged 18 to 45. That in and of itself, Hugh, is something that all policymakers, all Americans should be focused on as we win back the majority and focus on securing the border again, like it was under President Trump. So often when I travel to the border, I get beat up by liberals in my district or the talking heads. Why are you thousands of miles away from Northeast Indiana? But those drugs are directly affecting and destroying families, affecting communities in Northeast Indiana, all over the country. And that's what Republican Study Committee is focused on greatly at the moment.
The only thing that will stop fentanyl, which is synthetically produced and can be produced en masse and is in a couple of provinces of Mexico, is physical barriers and high-tech equipment for people passing through those physical barriers. I used to think we only needed 900 miles of fence. It might be more now because the return on fentanyl simply makes possible extraordinary investments for the cartels, if I'm correct, Congressman Banks.
Well, no doubt about it. Every time I go to the border, I'm struck by this. I talk to the Border Patrol agents, and Hugh, these Border Patrol agents aren't political. They're not Republican or Democrats, but they all tell me the same thing, that the border wall makes their job a lot easier. It makes it more possible for them to to stop the drug flows because it pushes them to certain points that where they can police it more and push back on it more. They're as devastated by the failed Biden border policies as anybody, as they recognize that they're failing, and that's directly what's causing the drug flow to continue to affect America in such a big way. So we have to be focused on that. Republican Study Committee is focused on that, and the solution is simple: go back to the Trump policies that worked. Continue building the wall. Reinstitute the very effective Remain in Mexico policy under President Trump. Reinstitute that right away, and then stop the devastating, the failed catch and release policies that we know has such a drastic impact under Obama and now again under Biden. That's what's causing this mess to begin with.
So, Congressman Jim Banks, when the RSC gets together, and it's really the preeminent caucus in the Republican side, it has to talk politics. Today, Punchbowl News morning newsletter has this: Biden is tanking in the polls. As we pointed out yesterday, a New Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll had Biden's strong disapproval at over 50%. Overall, Biden's approval was at 32-62, a truly dismal number for any president in a midterm election year. Will the Republican Study Committee, the National Republican Congressional Committee, Jim Banks, Kevin McCarthy, and the rest of you be able to take advantage of this?
Well, without question. I mean, you recognize that this president has the lowest approval of any president in American history at the end of his first year in office, and it's only getting worse. You realize the effect that that's going to have on this midterm election. I was with Leader McCarthy and the Republican leadership team over the weekend. We had a summit as we talked about preparing for not just the midterm election, but for January, for preparing our agenda that we will roll out when we get the majority back after the election. And Leader McCarthy summed this up very well. This is a once-in-a-lifetime election. And it's not just because of redistricting. It's not just because of President Biden's low approval. It's not just because of the growing number of Democrat retirements, now at 29 of them. But Republicans have an agenda that is a lot more different and a lot more popular to the American people than the out-of-touch agenda of these Democrats. And that's going to cause a dynamic where we have a chance not just to win back the majority, win it back in a big way, but we can't let up. We got to keep doing what we're doing, recruiting good candidates, raising the money, and then getting out and telling the American people about the agenda that we have that's so much better for America than what they've got, and we're going to have a good election night in November.
I'm talking with Congressman Jim Banks from Indiana. He's chair of the Republican Study Committee, good friend of the show. Congressman, now let's turn to Dr. Fauci. I had a column in the Post yesterday about the credibility gap. He's like McNamara in the 60s. People didn't believe McNamara by 1965. People don't believe Dr. Fauci anymore. And I have a new column coming out today or tomorrow just saying it is time for Fauci and Zients, for Walensky, Doctors Walensky, Dr. Fauci, Mr. Zients, who runs the White House COVID response. They've all got to go. I mean, they've completely lost confidence. Agree or disagree?
I completely agree. And you see the new CDC recommendations on getting rid of telling kids not to wear cloth mask anymore. I mean, from day to day, Hugh, I'm a dad of three girls, 12, 10, and 8 in public schools, and you know, as all parents around this country are dealing with the mixed messages, the flip flop on mask and vaccination mandates for kids, and all these recommendations that are so confusing and out of touch with reality. That's why, as you mentioned in your piece yesterday, the CDC approval rating, half of Americans don't trust the CDC. They don't trust Dr. Fauci anymore, and it's for good reason. It's time for a change there. It's time for an effort by this president, by all of our leaders, to restore faith in the CDC and our public health officials, because so many Americans have lost that faith.
Now let's turn to the China bill, because I was sort of an advocate for this, but you've been doing yeoman's work on exploring and explaining why it's not really good for America's defense, the version in the House. What is the bill? What ought it to be about? And if it does change, would you support it?
Well, I had, to be fair, I had concerns with the Senate bill, but they were workable concerns, and we were working across the aisle, and even with some of our friends in the Senate, on ideas that Republican Study Committee was putting forward to strengthen the Senate bill. But this House bill that Pelosi just introduced, called the Competes Act, which doesn't do anything to compete with China, Hugh. But a Republican Study Committee, our policy team this week, it was just released a couple of days ago, and we did a search of the bill. It's 2,900 pages long.
Oh my gosh!
It mentions coral reefs more than it mentions China, and I think nothing sums up how bad this bill is at missing the mark of competing with China than that. It gives billions of dollars to the UN Climate Fund. It creates a chief diversity officer at the National Science Foundation, and it gives hundreds of millions of dollars to woke universities to continue to do research that we know is often stolen by the Chinese Communist Party to begin with, without any restrictions or restraints on preventing that from happening moving forward. So it misses the mark. It doesn't help us compete with China. It doesn't get tough on China in a serious way, and that's why Republican Study Committee, we have our own bill, a counter bill that costs a fraction. I mean, the Democrat bill costs $250 billion. Our bill costs $1 billion, and it's filled with sanctions and more restrictions on research to protect our research, our intellectual property, and holding China accountable at the end. So,
she can't help herself.
Democrats are doing it.
Can't she, Congressman? Nancy Pelosi cannot help herself. Everything becomes pork. Were you surprised when she announced this week that she's running for election again? Doesn't that burden the Democrats with her looming presence again?
I don't know, man. It reminds me of when Speaker Ryan made his announcement that he was retiring halfway through his term, and we had a mixed debate about that. You know, did that hurt our fundraising efforts? Did that affect our election chances? And I don't at all disrespect Speaker Ryan's decision to do that. So when Speaker Pelosi announced this week that she made this decision that she's going to run again, I never take her at face value. I never trust what she's saying when she makes announcements like these. So we'll see. But the fact is, she is the most unpopular politician in America, and there's no doubt in my mind that her being on the ballot is going to hurt Democrats even more.
Yeah, it was like having run the party into the ditch and having Joe Biden's disapproval rating soar. Nancy Pelosi piled on by announcing she's coming back and making Americans say, with ever more resolution, they're behind Jim Banks, the Republican Study Committee, Steve Scalise, and Kevin McCarthy. Thank you, my friend. Jim Banks, Congressman extraordinaire from Indiana, for a Hoosier. He talks in complete sentences, and we're always impressed by that. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. Breaking news. A bridge has collapsed in Pittsburgh over Forbes Avenue near Frick Park. A number of cars are in the gully, and the president is on his way to Pittsburgh today. Say a prayer for those people involved who went over the edge, and what a metaphor for this presidency, and what a terrible, tragic day for Pittsburgh. I'll bring updates on that breaking news as they continue. Joined now by Governor Doug Ducey. That's a governor's life, isn't it, Governor? You wake up and there's a disaster every other day or so.
That's the job description, Hugh. So thinking about what's going on in Pennsylvania and Governor Wolf and everybody there.
All right. So, Governor, I wanted to have you on today because Secretary Mayorkas went to the border. I talked about this with Jim Banks. The border is wide open. 2 million illegal immigrants entered the country last year. Fentanyl is pouring in. You called on Secretary Mayorkas to resign. Why?
Because he's not doing his job, Hugh. He went to the border for a photo op. He was confirmed over a year ago. He doesn't call the governor. He doesn't call the congressional delegation. He has the border agents actually turning their back on him in the meeting because they know that he's just checking a box on this trip. Let's get a Homeland Security Secretary that actually cares about the border. We know that John Kelly and Christian Nielsen felt that way. I'll tell you, even Jay Johnson in the Obama administration was paying attention to this border. For whatever reason, Joe Biden and the self-appointed border czar, Kamala Harris, this is just a continuing laughing matter. I don't think they think the people of America are watching, but they are. But what's more important than the bad politics of this is the bad policy. Fentanyl is streaming into our country. When you hear that high school or college kid in Toledo, Ohio, or Omaha, Nebraska that overdosed, That dangerous drug came over our southern border, not to mention the illegal immigration and things we'll have to deal with, the people we don't even know that are coming into our country. So Secretary Mayorkas is not serious about this issue. It's time he steps down.
So, Governor Ducey, what do your state police tell you about how fentanyl gets in? My understanding is, unless you have a physical barrier with high-tech searchability, the cartels simply have too many ways to get the stuff across the border, and it's just deadlier than anything.
Well, we have a border strike force, and what they tell us is that the cartels use the human trafficking as a diversionary tactic to overwhelm Customs and Border Patrol and ICE so that then the drug runners can bring the fentanyl in. And yes, a grain of fentanyl can be deadly in and of itself. And there's thousands of pounds, 10,586 pounds of fentanyl that have come into this country in the last year. That's what we've interdicted, Hugh.
That is the leading cause of death between 18 and 49 is overdose. It's a fentanyl-based, it's like makes the heroin problem of years past seem like a blip, or the crack cocaine seem like a blip. So good on you, Governor Ducey. Let me turn to the second subject. You, as the chair of the Republican Governors Association, you threw a lot of effort into getting Glenn Youngkin elected, and Governor Youngkin's doing a great job. He's taken a page from the Ducey playbook about schools. What are you doing in Arizona about school districts that are continuing to make elementary school children mask, despite the science that there is no science? Nobody knows if it does any good whatsoever, and it does do harm.
Well, first I want to say I'm at the first RGA meeting of the year, and we are very proud of Glenn Youngkin. He's going to do so much good for the people of Virginia. I think he's off to a very fast start. I give him a lot of props and credit for leading right out of the gate on what he ran on. And I think if you talk to nearly any Republican governor, they see masks as an optional policy. If that's something that parents want for their child, then they're free to put the mask on. But these mandates are wrong, and they're hurting our kids. There's been way too much focus on masks and not enough focus on math. We are going to have masks optional in the state of Arizona, meaning if you want to wear a mask, you're free to do that. No one's going to stop you from doing that. But we're going to focus on catching our kids up. We're actually going to launch a summer camp at the end of this school year. Then all of our kids, get them in these flexible classrooms with great teachers so we can focus on math, reading, science, and American civics, eliminate the learning loss that has happened. But let's get kids back in classrooms. Let's get teachers at the front of the classroom. We're going to make sure this happens in statute this session, but we want our kids caught up.
So let me talk to you about the initiative you undertook, Governor Doug Ducey. When remote learning loomed as Omicron spread wrongly as an option, you issued an edict. Would you tell people about that?
Well, Arizona is the #1 school choice state in the nation. We're very proud of that, Hugh. We have over 500 charter schools. Charter schools are public schools. They're public schools with private management. We gave the option and the opportunity for children that if they wanted to find a classroom that was going to remain open, that they could go to that classroom. If a public school shut for even one day, they could take the educational dollars applied to their education and apply it for tutoring, tuition at a Catholic school or private school as necessary. We just wanted to make sure that kids that wanted to be in a classroom and parents that were going to get them to a classroom would have a classroom that was open and available to them, and that will continue on. We also provided dollars for transportation. Oftentimes the problem is there's a school available to a child, but they can't get to that school. We put money in, and we're going to expand that this year. That's what real school choice is. That's what real open enrollment is that parents can find the school that's best for their kid.
Now, Governor Ducey, did that have the impact of deterring school going remote? Because across the United States, there are districts that are going remote and nobody knows about it, even though it is widely condemned among education experts as having extraordinarily high costs, as are masks increasingly condemned on elementary school students at least. But what was the impact of your announcement on Arizona teachers unions and Arizona public schools? Did they draw back from remote learning?
I've been told that did deter remote learning, that did deter school closures. We still have just some bureaucrats out there, Hugh, that continue to play games. The union plays games every single day. We've got a lot of good people inside our school system that got involved in it because they wanted to help kids and teach kids. But it seems like the loudest are the activists, and they're always looking for this opportunity. They're taking what happened during the pandemic and trying to leverage it, and it's not helping our kids. It's not helping parents that work for a living, and that's why we're doing everything to battle back and arm our parents with the resources which they've earned through the tax system to apply to educate their children.
Do you think, you called on Secretary Mayorkas to resign. I am calling on Dr. Fauci, Dr. Walensky, and Jeff Zients to go. Is there any way Joe Biden can reset? I mean, he is in truly unfathomable negative territory, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution yesterday, with a disapproval rating above 50%, strong disapproval rating above 50%, an approval rating of 32%. You're the chair of the Republican Governors Association. You know what those numbers mean. He's failed.
Well, it's a failing presidency. There's no doubt about it. I think if you look at the red states across the country, you can see Americans vote with their feet. They are leaving these failing policies. Hugh, you know this. Ronald Reagan said that if the Pilgrims had landed on the West Coast, they would have never bothered to discover the rest of the country. Yet there is this mass exodus from California. People are coming to places like Arizona and Texas. So Joe Biden seems to be following the policies of Muriel Bowser here in Washington, D.C. This is where the meeting is. The city is locked down. They've crushed small businesses. There's vaccine mandates. There's mask mandates. And you really ask yourself why she continues to do this. And that seems to be the Biden vision. There isn't much of a plan. There was what we saw in Afghanistan as a failed retreat, no clear policy on Ukraine, this rising inflation. So even in a growing economy, Americans are actually making less money. And then, of course, for Arizona and really for the rest of America, this crisis at the border. This isn't just a Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, California problem. All of these dangerous drugs and poisons coming across the border are infecting our schools and our neighborhood. So Joe Biden and his team have got to get their act together, but it doesn't seem like he's picking the right people. Dr. Fauci's become such a polarizing figure. When you become a polarizing figure as a leader on health guidance, you probably need a new figure. So
yeah, absolutely,
it's going to be up to him to reset. Yeah.
Now, Governor, 2 points, political points to close out here. First of all, you've got to tell whoever your executive director is, the poor person has scheduled a meeting in Washington, D.C. in January. You're going to get a foot of snow today. So I'd go talk to your executive director and say, you got to get more practical. We really should be out in the West in January, not in the Beltway. I don't know who you've got in that job, but really you got to talk to them about that. But number two, which states look good for Republican pickups this fall in the governor house, in the state houses?
So in terms of the Republican Governors Association and those races, we always protect our incumbents first. We keep our red states red. And Hugh, never has there been a greater contrast between Republican leadership and Democrat leadership. So there's a lot of states that are on the map to turn them over. So we're very much on offense. You can look at states like Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Kansas, New Mexico, and Nevada are all on our target list. So we've got a lot of supporters in town for this meeting. People are very excited. They think that people like Gretchen Whitmer have earned the right to be removed from office because of her bad policies during the COVID era, and we intend to maximize that.
Governor Doug Ducey, always a pleasure. As your bell lap begins as governor, what's the big, the last question, what's the big must get done in your last year as governor of Arizona?
Well, it's not just one thing, Hugh. We want to keep our tax cut. We had the largest tax cut in Arizona state history. We've got the lowest flat tax in the nation at 2.5%. We're going to surge resources and additional personnel down to the border. We're going to secure Arizona's water future for the next 100 years, and then we're launching a summer camp this June, July, and August to get our kids all caught up. And we'll do all that. We'll leave $1 billion plus in the rainy day fund, and the state will have never been healthier financially.
A great 7 years with the 8th year bell lap coming up, Governor Doug Ducey. I'll be in Arizona next week moderating a couple of debates. I hope I see you, Governor. But remember, go find whoever it is that runs RGA and just tell them you don't want to come to D.C. in January. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to get to the meeting today. It's like 1.5 feet of snow or something like
Come
that.
on, Hugh. You're from Cleveland. I'm from Toledo.
Well, I know. We know how to do it, but those poor people from the South, they struggle and they fall down. They can't clear the streets. It's Bowser's D.C. Well, good luck, Governor. Good luck, Governor Doug Ducey. Buckeyes do laugh. We just call a snowfall like that April. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Congressman Michael Waltz, Florida's 6th Congressional District. He is a member of the United States Army Reserves. He is a Special Forces Green Beret veteran of Afghanistan and other places, and he is keeping his eye on Ukraine for us this morning. Good morning, Michael Waltz. I always tell people at the beginning, my son works for you. They can take that into account. Good to have you back.
Hey, good to be with you. Thanks so much, and happy belated New Year.
Yeah, and I know the snow is falling in D.C. I am curious. You just got back from Ukraine, and you were all over Fox News, and I am curious, why did you go, and why should Americans care about what happens to Ukraine?
Well, you mentioned my military background. I'm always a big proponent of walking the ground, of getting eyes on, of touching, of touching the situation, so to speak. And so we went out. It was a bipartisan delegation. Met with folks throughout the embassy, our military trainers. A big touch point for me is that the Florida National Guard actually has a significant presence there, several hundred of its soldiers conducting training along with our special forces that are also conducting training. And look, the sense of frustration there was palpable at really the indecision in the White House, how slow things were moving. The $200 million aid package that Biden finally approved was still sitting on his desk. And we met with the commander of the Ukrainian Special Forces and others that will take, I think, the brunt of any Russian incursion. And they made it very clear they were willing to fight. They did not need U.S. soldiers on the ground, but they, were desperately seeking more resources to face this massive Russian onslaught. And why should Americans care? Look, I think two reasons. One, Putin is trying to recreate the Soviet Union. He has always intended to do so. In fact, in 2005, he said that the demise of the Soviet Union was the greatest disaster in the 20th century. And importantly, in that statement, Hugh, he talked about all of the Russians that were left outside in the former Soviet state that were, and that how he felt for them, and that what a tragedy that was. And we've seen that as a pretext, whether it was in Georgia, Ukraine last time, Belarus, and others, to take care of those ethnic Russians that are in those other states. And the other reason, which I know you've talked about, is that the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, they are all watching very closely, and this is a very slippery slope that we're on if we don't take a tough stand.
Congressman Waltz, I think Lithuania is next up on the menu for Vladimir Putin because of that Russian ethnic enclave that he claims is being oppressed. They are in NATO Article 5. Then we will be in a shooting war with American troops because we have committed by treaty. We have to stop him in Ukraine. What else can we do? I don't know what we've sent. Did we send him ground-to-sea missiles because the Russian Navy's bearing down on their coast? Did we send them surface-to-air missiles?
We have not. The Ukrainians have been asking for it. We all know that if you look at the map, Russia took Crimea with a critical military Navy base and port access to the Black Sea, but they also want the port town of Odessa, and we should help the Ukrainians defend that. That's their lifeline to the rest of the world. And anti-ship missiles, they're called Harpoon missiles. Would go a long way, as would the surface-to-air. And again, when I pressed the embassy and others, they said, look, the reason we're getting from Washington is it would be too provocative. And they don't want to do anything that would risk provoking Putin. And I think you and I know that has the exact opposite effect. It's that kind of weakness is inviting Putin. But the biggest thing I think that the president should be doing right now is making it very clear, and so should Anthony Blinken. And where has our defense secretary been in all of this? He's really been absent in the messaging. Is make it clear to the Russians that we will continue to support a Ukrainian resistance, that we will continue to supply it, fund it, and only if you can change Putin's calculus that this will be far more bloody, this will be far more costly, and eventually could become a quagmire for him, do I think you could potentially prevent this incursion and this invasion in the first place.
That is a very interesting idea. We have less than a minute. Has anyone from the administration, to your knowledge, communicated to Putin that we will continue to equip and fund a Ukrainian insurgency wherever he occupies?
Not to my knowledge, but we have pressed the Pentagon to at least begin the planning, or at least present that option to the president, because it would also require basing, overflight, and other things from neighboring Ukrainian countries, particularly if we lose the port of Odessa, like Romania and like Poland. So there's an allied component there as well. And the other piece, Hugh, put sanctions on the table and tell Russia, you back down, you de-escalate, and we'll pull them back. Those sanctions should be in place right now.
I agree completely, Congressman Michael Waltz. We watch everything you say on Fox News and on Twitter about national security, one of the emerging strongest voices in the Congress on national security matters, Congressman Michael Waltz. Thank you. Hour number 3, the Hillsdale Dialogue. Straight ahead, America.